All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Living the Dream podcast. Today on the show, we have Brent Cassity, who is the author of Nightmare Success, and he hosts the podcast Nightmare Success In and Out. Brent, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thank you for asking. And we'd like to jump right in. So if you could start with telling us a little bit more about yourself and what you like to do for fun, that'd be great.
Hi. For fun. Okay, so I'll go backwards and for fun, I've got three daughters. Well, I've got a wife and three daughters, but my oldest daughter just had twin boys 8 months ago, and it is all kinds of fun. They're I've since I had three daughters, having boys in this transition of life is just fantastic. And it's just a lot of fun. And family is my biggest passion, and so it's just great that I'm here and able to take advantage of all that because it's just they say being a grandparent is a great thing, and it really is cool. And I love to go. I've got two labs, my Stanley and Wayne, and my wife and I walk our labs. That's fun, and I play a little golf.
There we go. There we go. Are you good at golf?
No, I just love it.
I
I
got you.
always thought, I always thought, Tim, that I could get good at it because you think because I played basketball and football, as growing up, you practice that, you get better and better and better.
Mhm.
Golf, you could play your whole life and never become a single handicap golfer. It's just one of those
Mhm.
things. Now, some people do. I just haven't figured that out.
Yeah. Yeah. I got you. Well, awesome. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. I read a little bit about your story, and it seems very interesting.
You know, so I have lived quite a journey of a life, and I like to say that I grew up pretty normal. I thought, I had a great childhood growing up. I grew up in a little town down in Southwest Missouri, Springfield, Missouri, and it was one of those childhood things where the kids played and rode bikes and picked teams for sports and went in, when it was time for dinner, and that was all very, very normal until I was about 14 years old, and my dad went to prison, and you know that wasn't normal, and it was quite a shock for me because everybody with your mom and dad, what they mean to you in your life, and I always say I wouldn't be who I am today without the dad that I had, and looking back on where I was at that point in my life, my dad was from a little town of like 3,000 people from a farm, and he was valedictorian of his high school. He won the state championship in basketball, went on to play D1 in college, went to law school, graduated number one of his class, got out of there, won some big court cases, and then he got into business and kind of had he was the guy with the golden touch, all at a very young age. So me as a kid growing up, I was like, man, I want to be that guy. I want to be him. And one night he called us in, my brother and I, in to the family room, and he said, "Boys, I got something to tell you." He said, "I've gotten myself into a heap of trouble with the bank that I own, and I told the government they could run the government, and I were in the bank." And he said, "It's gone from bad to worse since then."
Oof.
And he then started to tell me that he was being federally investigated, and he was going to try to get this behind him and maybe take a plea. And Tim, I got to tell you, there was nothing. I couldn't hardly hear the words coming out of his mouth. It was, and about the time that it all started coming back to me, he said, "And we're going to move from Springfield to St. Louis to get this all behind us and get a clean start." So, as a kid, that was a lot because I loved, I was getting ready to go to high school and I was all into sports and everything. And I thought, man, this is the worst family meeting I've ever had. And we moved into a neighborhood. It was kind of strange because back then you didn't have Google. So when we moved in, my dad had gone to prison. And so my mom wasn't widowed and she wasn't divorced. So the question is like, where's your dad?
Yeah.
you know, uh, so as a family, we just decided to say, he's out of town working, and somewhat true because he was down about 2.5 hours in Marion prison, and he had a job in the kitchen. So, and we went to visit him every weekend. So there's a couple of things that are kind of weird about that whole thing. One is that, I remember driving down there as a kid. I was 15 years old, and I was thinking, wow, we're that family now. We are that family that goes every weekend to visit my dad in prison. It was just kind of a lot. And the other thing was, when you have someone you love that goes to prison, that moment when they come around that corner, you don't know what to expect. Are they a prison creature now? Have they changed? He's going to have a uniform on. But he seemed like, and I think he put a good face on that. He was doing okay. He was well adjusted to the situation. So that was somewhat of a relief to me. But I remember going back out to the car thinking, this will never happen to me. No matter what I do in my life, this will never happen to me. And the weird thing is at 47 years old, I was 15 at the time, I ended up standing at the Gates of Leavenworth and thinking to myself that 15-year-old kid said, this will never happen to me. So yeah, there's a lot that goes on in between all that. I guess
Clearly.
I can fill in the blanks a little bit. My dad came out of prison. He did at that time, it was back in the 80s, and he did 6 months of his sentence, got out. And there was one company that survived, and it wasn't a very sexy company. It wasn't in his name. He put it in a family trust. So it was my brother, my mom, and me. And it was called National Prearranged Services, and it basically took care of your funeral arrangements ahead of time. You froze the price. You picked out all your services to take the burden off your family. And that was a company that really was solving a problem. So it began to grow. And, I went to college. That company continued to do pretty well. I thought I was going to be a law school, a trial attorney. And, I had taken political science and theater, and, that was my world. Once I realized I wasn't going to be an NBA basketball player, I was going to be a trial attorney. So, because I was 6'1" in 8th grade. So I thought, at least 6'4", 6'5", but no, 6'1", nobody was looking for me after my sophomore year in high school. But I did pretty well in college. I graduated with a 3.4. I wasn't a 4.0, student. But the one thing that I had a really hard time with, Tim, was taking standardized tests. I mean, I could register on the dumb scale when it came to a standardized test. So I couldn't get past the LSAT. And so I really had a fork that happened in my life. And I'd done sales over the course of my college career. And I like sales because it kind of had a rhythm and flow to it, kind of like sports. You closed the deal, you had the adrenaline rush, you had a scoreboard, you either won or you lost. And it didn't matter how old you were. If you were good, you got to play. So I went to my dad and I said, hey, Dad, I'm thinking about maybe sales and maybe coming into the company and trying this out. And he said, oh, my dad was always the biggest cheerleader. He said, you'd be great at this, Brent. He said, yeah. He said, you got these skills and he said, you'd be able to. And I said, but Dad, wait a minute. I said, one thing I want to do is, I said, you cast such a big shadow. Is there any way that I can just go somewhere pass fail? And I'm just Brent. And he said, well, yeah. He said, we just opened up the state of Texas. He said, you can move down there. We signed up a funeral home in Austin, Texas. I said, sign me up. I was 23 years old. That sounded awesome, being that age in Austin, Texas. And, Tim, it was in my wheelhouse. It did feel, and everything that I was doing, that all felt right. And I ended up growing a big region. Our team won every division of the national contest. I got promoted to regional vice president. So I felt like I had gotten somewhere on my own, and this was a new path for me. My dad was more than happy at that time to just throw the keys over to this 20-something kid, because we had an insurance company that had grown out of this sales company, because the funeral contract was then funded by an insurance policy. And he loved that part of the business. He loved trading and numbers and all the things I was not interested in. And, I always say it's funny, going into a family business, I don't know that I would recommend it. There's a lot of things that are some pros to it. Family gets to, succeed together and grow together and that. But it's kind of like the Beatles or, Fleetwood Mac or the Eagles. Everybody wants to be the lead singer. So you got to kind of figure out your roles.
Yeah.
And, so that company, I got started with it and we were in 3 states and we grew that to 25 states, representing like over 2,500 funeral homes. My brother came into the business, when he got out of college. He was very technology savvy, and we created something that kind of was a sexy company. It was called Forever Enterprises. And my brother had found a cassette tape of my grandmother who had died 3 years prior. And he came downstairs. He said, "Wow, Mom, Dad, Brent, listen to this." So we listened to this cassette tape and we're like, "Wow, isn't that something?" She's been gone for 3 years, but you almost forget the inflection in her voice, the way she laughed and talked. And we thought, this means so much to us. Why don't we have more of this? And we start talking about, isn't it crazy how if you're a famous person, a president, a movie star, a famous athlete, you expect that. Like Queen Elizabeth dies. If Queen Elizabeth died and they just said that her services are Sunday, you'd be thinking, well, like, where's all the stuff? Where's her life? And we started talking about why don't we have that for our grandparents and parents and uncles and aunts? We said, why don't we become the filmmakers of everybody else? And that genesis of the idea was born of Forever Enterprises, that led us into buying cemeteries. And we created a production company that, as it went, I think we did 19,000 plus life stories. And we would go to the people that own cemetery property. We'd set them down with a camera and film them going through their scrapbooks, and basically their life story was built. That was put on a touchscreen console, and as the internet came, you had the Forever Network where you could go and you could meet these people that you hadn't had an opportunity to meet in your life, or revisit them. And that was something, because nothing had changed in that industry in 125 years. We were kind of seen as the innovators, these 2 young brothers, taking on something new in the industry. And so we got covered, the front page of the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Forbes, Fortune. When Hollywood Forever was bought, HBO dropped by and did a documentary on us called The Young and the Dead that spawned the HBO series. It was called 6 Feet Under. So at that time in my life, I had 3 daughters. I had a vacation home. Kids are in private schools. I'm just feeling like, I'm very accomplished at 40 years old. And then I'm filling up my gas tank one day and I get a phone call from the guy that runs our insurance company. He says, "Brent, I just got the weirdest phone call. This lady who I was talking to said that she's from the state of Ohio in the investigative division of the insurance department, and she's got information that's going to bring our company down." I was like, "Oh man," and it was kind of like I had felt this feeling before, probably back to when I was 15 years old, and Dad was telling me that, he's problem with the bank, but this time I'm in it. This is different. And everything starts with a sliver of a beginning that grows into a blob. And ours is that we had a insurance company and we had a reinsurance company. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on all what that means. It basically is insurance company writes business, the little one sells its business off to the big one, and it gives that little one a commission back. And that big company takes the liability. So we had just cut a sweet deal with this gigantic reinsurance company, and they came back to us and said they wanted to renegotiate the contract. Dad, being who he was and the legal mind that he was, and kind of the chip on the shoulder that he always had, being the farm kid, "No, that's not in the contract. That is not in the contract, so we don't have to renegotiate." Well, that led to an arbitration, and Discovery went from 2 million to 4 million to 8 million to 12 million, and it started to hit our capital and surplus. Us being in 25 states, that began to create a stir, and it became a wildfire. My dad came to me and he said, "Listen, Brent," he said, "we've got a forest fire going on here. I can't go talk to these people, being an ex-felon, my credibility of being in that room, but I think you would be a good voice." And Tim, I was like, damn, this is the one company that I wasn't paying any attention to. arrogantly. I just thought I could do the sales here, dump it over there, and all life is good. And this is the company now that I was going to go out and defend, and I wanted to. I was cocky enough, arrogant enough to believe that I could save the day. Put the cape on and go in and to these regulators and do the work that needed to be done, and just tell me what I need to know, and I'm going to go do it. We had 400 or 500 people that were working for us, so that also played into wanting to save everything that we had for these people who believed in us. And there were days that I thought that we were going to make it, and you go to bed with it, you wake up with it, and we didn't. The company went into receivership that led to a criminal investigation that went on for 6 years with 12 million documents, and in the end, we didn't win. And so when that kind of came down to the crunch time, my daughters were teenagers at the time, and they said, "Dad, there's just no way that you can go to prison or you can go to trial. We'll lose you forever." And one of the things one of the things that they had me on dead to center was in 1994, Congress passed a law that an ex-felon couldn't work in the business of insurance. My dad was an ex-felon, and the way that we were structured, I was a CEO and owned the company.
Mhm.
So that carried a 5-year sentence, and then they wrapped you up in a conspiracy of mail fraud. Anytime you put anything in the mail, anything you wire, and anything you bought's money laundering. Those charges they
Because of the
stacked.
because of the ex-felonship, or oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
so you so you end up looking at those charges, and um, it was 6 people that ended up to be indicted, and it was just a lot. It was a lot, and finally, after I had the family meeting with my daughters, I knew that, and I was worn out. We'd lost everything, and you just get used to the fight, I think. But once you say, "Okay, I'm going to take the plea." By the way, 97% of the people who get indicted end up with plea bargains. So it's an interesting statistic in the United States. But when you see United States of America versus your name, it's maybe the most intimidating thing you'll ever see in your life.
Yeah.
But I can say this, that when it came to that time, I remember the night before I was going to go down to the courthouse to plead guilty. We had a family call. It was around 4th of July weekend. My family was up at our vacation home, and so we had a family call. It was myself, my dad, my mom, my brother, and Julie, my wife. And it was more of a planning session. We're going to plead guilty. We've got the girls. They've got college, and we're just trying to walk ourselves through, how this is all going to work. And I got off the phone that night by myself in my house. It was the first time it really hit me that, hey, I'm going to go to prison. And once I go to prison and I come out, I'm going to be an ex-felon. And what does that mean? I hadn't even contemplated, this is a life-changing thing for me, because once you're an ex-felon, it doesn't go away. You're always that. I started feeling really bad for myself, and thinking, can I live as an ex-felon? Do I want to live as an ex-felon? Does my wife, who's been a warrior through all this, does she need a clean start? To my kids? I mean, is that a stain for them to be part of this whole thing going forward with a dad who's an ex-felon? So I was drinking, not good. Don't drink and contemplate going to prison on your own by yourself. So I literally, absolutely, and it puts my hair on my arms to stand up to say, I actually pulled out a sheet of paper and started writing out how great my wife had been throughout our life. Met her when we were 13 years old. I was 15. We'd gone through every life stage together. She needed a clean start. And my kids, gave them all the fatherly advice, going forward. And all my friends that have been such a support had another drink, grabbed the keys to the car, and went down, turned the car on. I didn't know if I was going to go run into a tree or if I was just going to let the car run. And Tim, it was like something hit me like a lightning bolt. What in the hell, Brent, are you doing? you're not this guy. You couldn't leave a worse legacy for your family that you did this. You're the guy half full guy. You're the solution guy. You're the guy that's looking for a way out. And it was at that moment that I truly came to terms with the fact that what's the difference between a victim and a survivor? The victim, first of all, it takes your energy away. You point fingers, you blame, you curl up in a fetal position. But if you say you're a survivor, you feel different. And one thing I knew from that point forward was no matter what else happens to me, and there was a lot of scary things coming at me at that moment. I was going to go plead guilty. I didn't know if I was going to go to prison for 1 year, 5 years, but I didn't know where I was going to prison. All that stuff was scary, but I told myself, regardless of what happens, I'm going to make my family proud of how I handle it. And that was really my rock bottom moment. Everything after that, I felt different. I just knew that whatever was coming at me, I would take it, handle it, adapt to it. So when I was standing at the gates of Leavenworth, I remember I hugged my wife and my mom, my brother, and got out of the car. And the place looks like Shawshank. Leavenworth looks like Shawshank Redemption. It was built in 1879. It's just a scary, spooky looking place. And I was scared to death. It was January 14th, 2014. Kansas. The wind's whipping through there. It's freezing cold. And all I could think of is that everything I knew and everything I loved was behind me, and everything in front of me was the unknown. And I didn't know if I was going to die. I didn't know if I was going to get raped. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was going to get beat up. And, the biggest surprise out of all of it was that I found out that nothing is ever as bad as your mind makes it out to be. Not even prison. And when I got through the whole processing, they prisonize you basically when you go through and make sure that you understand where you are and humble you to the point of never being as humbled as you are. But when I got there, where I was, they gave me all my bedding and my uniform and all that stuff, and I was walking up to A2, the A2 block. This guy came up to me, Hispanic guy, and he says, "I'm your bunkmate. I'm Romo." He said, "Wow, Cassity, you don't look like you've ever been here before. You're going to need a lot of help." I was like, oh man, it must be written all over my face. And he said, "Okay, here we go." He said, "Bed has to be made military style." I said, he said, "I'm going to show you how to do that." And so I started like opening the locker. He said, "Oh, no, you can't put anything in. It's filthy." He got the cleaning stuff out, started cleaning it. And it's like, wow, this guy within minutes is helping me. And then as soon as we got done with that, he said, "All right, Cassidy, come with me." Walked me across to some more bunk beds. And there was a guy sitting there, and he said, "Clark, Cassidy, Clark, he's one of you. Help him." And I was like, "Hi." What was really weird, and I it almost sounds like I'm making up this story. Clark was 8 years older than me, and we had gone to the same high school. We both played basketball, and it was like, how in the world does that happen?
Yeah.
Here we are at Leavenworth, and we have a connection that we went to the same high school, and from that point on, he really helped me out. I remember making the phone call to my family within minutes because he showed me that I could go down to the counselor's office being a new inmate and let my family know that I was okay here. And I remember, the counselor dialing the phone, and I picked it up, and it was so weird because, I had just seen them like 5-6 hours ago, and now they're on the other line, and I'm in prison. And I said, "You know what? I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. I just feel that, don't worry about me. I've got this." And the thing that I thought, and the thing that got me through, because people think, how do you go to prison, if you've never been before? And remember that night I was looking up and I was laying in my bunk bed. I was on the top bunk, and I was looking at all, they light up the yard and everything. And was thinking, wow, after all this time, it's been, 6 years, this whole fight, and here I am. I'm in this bunk bed. I'm in prison in Leavenworth. What am I going to do? And I remember Romo had given me a piece of paper to take notes and gave me a pen. And I got out my bunk bed, and there was still light coming through we were pretty close to the bathroom. The lights were on. And I just started writing out my goals. How I'm going to survive this. What am I going to do? And it really was the thing that steadied me for my sentence. I got a 5-year sentence, so it wasn't like I was just going to be there for a few days. So I really had to figure out and steady myself on what I was going to do. And I really think that those things that I wrote down that night were the things that helped me not lose my biggest thing was I was afraid of losing myself in prison. I was afraid of becoming like prison Brent instead of Brent, that I would become part of the environment, get institutionalized, something would change, and I'm a different person. But what I found is once you're in a different environment, you've got like a couple of choices to make. You can fall into the environment, or you can continue to do the things that make you you. And for me, that got me through. And one of the things, I'll just say what I did. One of the things I did is I walked around, didn't say much, and looked around like who's getting it right around here. In prison, there's two different paths to go. There's the people that have given up, and there are people who's trying to make it. Shawshank, they talk about that. Morgan Freeman says you get busy living or get busy dying. Or I think actually Andy says that, but it's kind of like that in prison. People that give up, and then you see people that are trying to make it. And so my thing was to go around, see who's getting it right. Who's in a good workout routine, who's reading books that I like, who's got a prison job that I would be like to eat up my time with, keep me. And then I would go up and talk to him and ask him, how are you doing this? What are you doing? You look like you're doing your time better. And for me, humbling myself and finding people who are making it work and then implementing that into my routine really helped me. It was like, when you do that, it's like getting the answers to the test before the test. You can actually see it, implement it, borrow it, whatever, but bring it into what you're doing. And so that was really a big deal for me. The other thing is that in the movie, of Shawshank, Andy's got that thing in his mind about Zay Wantaneo, and he's, they put him in the hole forever. He comes out and he's talking to Morgan Freeman. He says, Zay Wantaneo, he starts talking to him. It's the whitest of the white sands. It's the bluest of the blue waters. It's the fishing boat that he's going to fix up and take his friends out on fishing. And that in the little beach house is going to be the place where they watch the sun go down and have drinks. You got to have something, whether you're in prison or out of prison, that your Zay Wantaneo. For Andy, he chipped through a wall for 19 years. And every day he had the daily victory of letting that wall out into the yard through the holes in his pockets. But it kept him alive, and it kept him with what he was doing in there. And so he didn't lose his mind. And I always say that for me, that was a big thing is to stay plugged in as much as you could. The third thing is that win the day, one day at a time. Life's unfair, make a difference regardless. And one of the things that my youngest daughter made me a calendar every year, and every night one of my routines was that I would get out the calendar and I'd write in that little box for the day, and I'd put in there my win for the day. And my mind hack was that you have bad days. So you have bad days in prison, bad days out. But if I had a bad day, I went all the way down bad. I mean, all the way to my soul. Man, this is a bad day.
Yeah.
And my mind hack was I forced myself not to fill in 2 boxes of bad. And the reason why I did that is that I knew if I filled out 2 boxes of bad, 2 boxes of bad could turn into a week, could turn into a month, could turn into a year, and then you do lose yourself. You do get into that cocoon and give up. And so for me, if I had a bad day, I had to do whatever I could do to find that win for that day, to come back up and bring myself back to level. the other thing was, you know, when you're in prison or whether you're out of prison, it's so important that you learn from your mistakes. And so many people, whether they're trying to build a business or trying to do something new, they're always afraid of making mistakes. And I think there's a lot of reasons why that is out there right now. I think Instagram and Facebook and all that, you see everybody's best dinners, their best vacations, the best parties that you're not at. And nobody's living that life. That's the life that they want you to see. So everybody's afraid that they're going to make mistakes, so they're not going to be a part of that, or they're not ever going to get there because they'll make a mistake. The thing about mistakes is if you read all these books, and I read a book a week while I was in prison, all the great women, men who built empires made mistakes. They learned from the mistakes, they evolved from their mistakes, and they got better. What you do with a mistake is either going to make you a winner or a loser. What you do with a mistake will get you stuck or unstuck. And it's important that our society understands that mistakes happen. And the only thing you never want to do is make two mistakes of the same mistake, because that is bad. Like Jack Nicklaus says, you can make a bad shot on a hole, but you make two of the bad shots, that really messes up the hole. So don't do that. Make a mistake, learn from it, evolve, and get better. And the last one really, I guess, was my biggest concern was that don't give in, don't give up. Keep being yourself regardless of the circumstances. Otherwise, you'll lose what makes you you. And I think, I saw so many guys that got institutionalized and they get close to getting out. They used to say that term was getting close to the door. And what had happened is that they got to the point where what was inside prison became more familiar to them and more comfortable to them, even though they hated it, than freedom, because they'd been removed from that for long enough that became the scary, uncomfortable proposition. So they would put hands on a guard or they'd catch another charge to stay in that ugly environment. And, the Morgan Freeman, I'm talking a lot about Shawshank, but it's one of my favorite movies. He says, Andy, when you first get here, he said these walls you look at and you perceive them as they're here to keep you in. And he says, the longer you're here, they're the arms that hug you as comfort. And I think that's what happens to people when they fall into bad routines, ugly routines, and they are afraid to step into. And the reason why I think of the word nightmare success is when I was walking the track, I was thinking, man, this is bad. This is really bad. I can't believe that I'm here. And what do I do now? I had all this, and now I'm walking the tracks of Leavenworth up against a fence with barbed wire. So I started thinking, what do I do with my journey from here? And I started thinking about my life has been such an interesting ride. I think, and I started thinking about what's the term? And I thought nightmare success is that thing where if you want something or if you want to set yourself free, the only way that's going to happen is you're going to have to step out of your comfort zone into the thing that you fear, into your nightmares, into the things that make you nervous, into the things that scare you, over, under, around it. But if you do that, you find your success and you find your freedom. So my world is that everyone has built up prisons in their own mind. It could have been a bad childhood, could have been your parents got divorced, could be you're in a bad job, you've had a bad marriage. There's so many things, a health crisis. What can you do to not get locked in and stay in that world that you don't want to be in, but it's the one that you know? And I think that you have to gather yourself, find your Zewantaneo, because the only thing that allows you to step into the unknown is having that feeling, that passion of why. Why am I doing this? What am I going to get? How, it is the whitest of the white sands, the bluest of the blue water. Whatever that is in your mind that makes you feel a certain way when you wake up, that's what gets you stepping. And when you start stepping, you're like, okay, that's one step. 2 steps, that wasn't as bad as I thought. 3 steps, wow, I'm into this. And I think that is the the mind hack for people to get unstuck. So when I got out, I wrote a book called Nightmare Success, Loyalty, Betrayal, Life Behind Bars, Adapting, Finally Breaking Free. And when I was out promoting the book, I started thinking about, I'd like to do a podcast. I remember I was walking with my wife and we were walking the dogs. And I said, I think I might do a podcast. She said, well, what's your podcast name? So I got like 50 guys on my Facebook, and we all went to Leavenworth. I think I might start talking to them. And what I want to do is, what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? And we'll talk about life before prison, life in prison, life out of prison. And, Tim, I started doing that and I fell in love with it and it became a passion of mine, because I think there's a couple of different things that happen when they hear from people who've gone to prison. I don't see my podcast as a prison podcast. I see it as one for hope, inspiration, and overcoming. Because for one, I think maybe people are drawn in because people have gone to prison. But once they start hearing the stories and they start understanding how that person got to where they are and the strategies they use to get through it, there's some commonality that's built there. And, on the outside of that, maybe it helps them get unstuck, but it also gives them the feeling that maybe that person isn't as different as me. Maybe I'll possibly give that person a second chance if I run across somebody like this. And if we have that, that would be a big deal in our society, because desperately, these people who get out of prison, and, we're all put in the same bucket, and unfortunately, when you carry an ex-felon tag, it doesn't matter if you cheated on your taxes or you killed somebody. You had an ex-felon. I always say that you can't discriminate against anybody in society legally except the ex-felon.
Yeah.
And you can choose not to rent them an apartment. And if you check the box off that you're an ex-felon for a job, they can discriminate against you. And I think a lot of those things need to change so that people who really desperately want to get a second chance in life can get back into society, because the numbers are so bad, just horrible. I mean, 2/3 go back in 3 years, and 5 years, 3/4 go back. And it's just a cycle of that. And one of the things I want to show people with Nightmare Success, the podcast, is it doesn't happen to everybody. There's a whole bunch of people that I talk to that have walked through and made it. And the thing that I'm encouraged about is my podcast now is in 235 prisons in the United States. And so these guys are getting a chance to hear these stories from these guys and women that they're making it out here. It doesn't have to be a merry-go-round back in. Put the right action plan in place, take the right steps, and you'll have a chance. And that's my passion now. I love it. I get inspired by it, listening to the guys and women who are on the podcast talking about their lives. And, I'm hoping that as this grows, it becomes a bigger voice so that we can speak of the 25 million ex-felons in the United States for rights of people to get back into society the way that they want to re-enter the world and society.
Dude, that is awesome. That is an awesome passion. It's an amazing story. And I love how it was the simple things that kind of got you through. Of like, you knew you were gonna have bad days, and when you had bad days, they were really bad days, but you never let yourself have two of them. You had the very you know, just simple things that got you through. And that's crazy, because prison is definitely one of my biggest fears. Like I don't know,
Sure.
I don't know. There are definitely some above it, but it's probably top five.
It should be, because it's not an environment. I released a podcast today, and one of the coolest guys, his name's Ken Nixon, and his story is that middle class guy, he just started a new business, a towing company, bought himself a new house, had a 1-year-old boy, and he worked all day. He's tired. I think his mom had come over, a couple of aunts had dropped by, and just a busy day, and they'd gone to bed. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, doors broken down, rifles everywhere, flashlights, lights beaming, and he's got his 1-year-old baby on his chest, and they come in, they drag him out of the house. He has no idea what's going on. And when he gets into the cop car, they said, that's the guy that killed those 2 people. He didn't. And he was convicted of murder, wrongly convicted of murder. And it took him 16 years to unravel it. He got 2 life sentences without parole. And, you know, the crazy thing about Ken's story is, and I've had 5 or 6 of these guys on that have been wrongly convicted of murder, is he never gave up. He was in the worst prison you could be in because he was in for murder in a maximum security as an innocent man trying to prove his innocence. And how he got out was a Michigan law school class took up his case, started doing research. The Detroit newspaper picked up on it, wrote a big article. Then the Innocence Project caught their attention, and the Wayne County Integrity Unit teamed up with the Innocence Project, and they got him out. And it's scary because, you know, what you're saying, Tim, is that people, that's one of their fears, but this can actually happen to somebody. That they had a jailhouse snitch and a 13-year-old that changed his story 3 times, and a lead detective that said, in a memo said, we got the wrong guy, and they proceeded forward. And it only took him 6 months to put him away. There's so many. He was the 38th guy in Michigan in the last 4 years that's been released as an innocent man. So only because Michigan has this integrity unit that they're focusing on bad cases and reviewing them. If you can only imagine how many people, just if you take that in Michigan and multiply that across the United States, everybody's worst fear is something like that happening. That's everybody's nightmare. Just minding your own business, breaking into your house, dragging you out, and telling you did something you have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's insane. That's insane. So you got the podcast in prisons now. How are the prisoners listening to the podcast? Does it happen like a big radio? Do they all have these? They don't have
That's a good question. That's a good question. It's a platform called Adobo, and they're able, these are state prisons. You can't do it in the federal prisons yet, but in the state prisons, you can buy a tablet that's kind of similar to an iPad. And so it's got things that you can download. There's like financial education tools, different education tools, and then they can listen to podcasts that are approved through the system of the prison system through Adobo. So it's for me, it's so cool because it's a complete cycle for me to have a voice back in the prison of a world I lived in. You know, it's and I would eventually like to go back into the prisons and be speaking to those guys, because I think, you know, they need to hear that, you know, it's doable. You know, things might look really dark now, but don't give up on it. Don't give up on yourselves. Don't stay in here if you have a choice.
Yeah. I love it. Well, tell us about your dreams and goals for the podcast and for the rest of your life. Now that you're
Well, I'm working right now. We are working on a TV series, and I've got 2 or 3 producers that we're talking to, and the idea is to bring. I'll have to send the sizzle reel to you, Tom. The idea of the podcast or the TV series is to bring these stories to life on screen, walk the streets with these people, see where they live, tell their story. And I think it's something that could really create its own path, because each one of these stories have so many different layers to them that I think that there's nothing quite like it that you see on TV. And the end of it is that there's something you can learn. There's nuggets of wisdom that you can take away, and it's inspirational to see these guys make it from, you know, crazy environment. And there's so many different ones. Harley Blakeman, a guy that was on, he went from homeless to prison to CEO of a national company called Honest Jobs that works with 1,300 companies in the United States to help place ex-prisoners into jobs, and it was because he couldn't get one.
Mm.
And there's so many different stories of people who have taken what has happened to them and used that to try to better the experience for people that are coming after them.
Homeless to felon to ex-felon to CEO of a
It's
major
pretty
company.
cool, isn't it?
That is epic.
It's cool.
Well, awesome. So you're working on a TV series that'll walk through a day in the life of ex-felons. You want
Yeah,
to get to the point where you're speaking in prisons eventually. Is that
yeah,
right?
I would. And eventually, what I'd like to see, and what I want to help become a voice of with a lot of the different people I've met, is to create almost like a fall a one voice, put an umbrella around everybody that they can join as one, and so that we can go to Congress, we can go to different places in different states to try to change and make good on the reentry things that make it so hard to get out. So that's one of the things I'm really working on now is to take these voices that are outstanding voices, put them all around a table, and let's start marching forward for the people who don't have a voice to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's getting the voices around the table. Are you talking about just the ex-felons that have been on your show or all 25 million ex-felons? And
What I'd like to have is that you've got a national board, and that board you join as a group. If you're an ex-felon, you join into that, and we have a portal that has things that could take and help and do for you, and we then take the most important elements that are out there in society and we push them forward into the political and legislative environment so that we can be heard.
mm, mm, I gotcha. I gotcha. So rallying the voices and pushing issues through the political sphere to kind of make change happen.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And is the thing that causes most felons to go back in just a lack of like work and good community, or there's some other aspects that lead to it?
I think the biggest thing is that so many people who go to prison lose not just material things, they lose everything. They lose the support of their family and the help and the support of those around them. And so when they lose everything, I was around so many of them that did. It makes it so much harder. If you've got somebody that can give you a helping hand, a friend, your family, whatever that is, that helps you to the next step when you get out, it makes all the difference in the world. For those who don't have that, there's a real struggle that happens, because if you can't find a place to live and you can't find a job, there's a really good chance that you're going to fall into something really bad. And that thing that is really bad will probably send you back to prison because you're on probation, and there's a cycle that happens, and it's unfortunately a very profitable cycle that continues to get bigger, and it's not really the way we should be doing. I think our system really should be more about rehabilitation, not about punishment. And our system is all built around punishment, and there's the rehabilitation part is left in in the shadows.
Which is interesting because punishment has definitely been proven ineffective.
Yeah, yeah,
Like just across the board. Nobody is out here thinking punishment is effective for like,
right.
it'll stop you from doing what you're not supposed to do, but it doesn't show you what to do. And it also creates a lot of negative emotional affect that'll come out some shape, some way later.
Yeah, totally agree.
Well, if there were one or two
Absolutely.
people that you could meet right now, and this could be a specific person or a type of person, and they'd really help you take that next step towards these dreams and goals of getting the TV series out there and putting the voices of ex-felons across the country around a table and making change happen, who would that person be and how would they help you?
I'd love to have a conversation with Van Jones. Van Jones is a big voice right now. He was just given $100 million with Jeff Bezos to help the system of reentry and create inspiration and put things in place that could create that. So I would love to have a conversation with him, and in a moment, an hour, however long I could have him, to really talk about it, because I think there's a lot of things that he could do with that money that could really affect change. Um, I'm fascinated by what Kim Kardashian's doing. A lot of people like say, I'm behind this, and they get on boards and they, get to go to the country club and say that, hey, I'm doing this for these people, but they're really not. I think Kim Kardashian, with what she's done with her platform of having the number of followers that she has, and getting her law license and really working towards trying to affect change in the system, I would like I'd love to have a conversation with her about what her hopes and dreams are with her platform, and if anything could make sense, because I I've really impressed with what she's been able to do in a short amount of time with what she's focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. So Van Jones and Kim Kardashian.
Yeah, if you could set that up, Tom, that'd be great.
I'll work on it. I'll work on it. Awesome. Well, we got about 5-ish minutes here. So, is there anything else you want to chat about, touch on before we get going? Otherwise, I have a couple more questions I can hit us with.
There's one thing that I've talking about life and prison and what it all means to all of us. How do we get to the next step? There was a story of this guy that went to prison. He was his name was Damon West. He was a quarterback down in Texas, and he got tangled up in drugs and got a prison sentence. And he was having a really tough, doing a hard time in prison, going in and out of the hole. And this old inmate came up to him and he said, I don't think you're going to make it, Damon, in here if you keep doing your time like this. And he said, you got to understand. He said, this place, this prison yard, he says, like a boiling pot of water. He said, are you following me? And Damon was like, yeah. He said, so if I put a carrot in that pot of water, he said, what's that boiling pot of water do to the carrot? So it makes it soft. That's right. He said, so you can't get soft in here. You get soft in here, you could get hurt. You could lose yourself. He said, now if I take an egg and I put it in that boiling pot of water, he said, what happens to the egg? He said, it's hard. He said, you can't get hard in here. He said, you still got to keep your empathy. Can't lose your heart. They can't get hard. He said, now if I take a coffee bean and I put it in the water, what's that coffee bean do to the water? He said, I don't think I'm following. He said, that coffee bean changes the water to coffee. He said, that's what you want to be in here, and that's what you want to be in life. You want to be the coffee bean that changes the water, not the water changes you.
Mm, that's a wise guy.
Wise guy. I love the analogy.
Yeah. How do you think we go about being that person, being that coffee bean in our environment, especially when an environment is, because some people are in prison, which can be a extremely negative environment, but it's also applicable to people just in everyday life who are in
Absolutely.
extremely negative families, or they're stuck in poverty, or they're on the verge of homelessness, whatever it may be, or they are homeless.
Yeah.
So how do we go about doing that?
I think it's people, places, and things. I think, all the stories I've heard is, if you get and change if you want to change and you want what somebody or whatever that is, whatever your passion is, and it's not where you are, you've got to change the environment. You got to change the people. You got to change the things. If you can identify that, there's so many things that you can do, because once you take action on it, it might not be perfect, and you might have to, evolve and step 2 steps back and 1 step forward. But as long as you know what that is, and you have that passion inside of you of what you want, there's people, places, and things that you can look for that are doing what you want to do, that you can implement into your life, and you can start stepping towards it. And I think what it does is you see somebody that's getting it right, who's making it work. If you implement that in your life, you can take more confidence with it because it works for them. It's not like you have to reinvent it. Just do what they're doing and it's working for them, and you can start stepping towards what you want.
I love it. Well, awesome, Brent. That's all we got for you today, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate it, Tim. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, and where can people find you if they want to know more about what you do, or just hear you speak more?
So the easy place to find me is at brentcassity.com. That's my website, but I do spell it wrong. all my life growing up as a kid, I wanted to be part of Sean and David Cassidy, and I spell my name Cassity, so they spelled it a dy. So it's BrentCassity.com. I'm on all the social platforms. I love getting messages on my with anywhere, but my website, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all those places you can find me at Brent Cassity. And in my book, you can find Amazon, Barnes and Noble, even Walmart has it. So that's a good thing.
There we go. Well, awesome. If you guys are listening to this and you loved what Brent had to say, you want to know more or just learn more from him and his experience, feel free to check him out. All the links to do so will be down in the show notes. Thank you guys for watching. We will see you on the next one. And on that note, we're out.